Hey everybody, my name is Stephen Feuerstein. I'm here for another Feuertip all by myself. Michelle couldn't make it today, but don't worry, we'll still have fun. And it is going to be, I think, quite entertaining because what I'm going to do is talk about how I messed up and basically violated previous Feuertips that I suggested to all of you and how that impacted the work I did and the refactoring I needed to do and stuff like that. So this is primarily a reminder of anybody who looks at me on Twitter or anywhere and says, "Oh, Stephen, the big fat book. He is just must be an amazing developer." Actually, I think I'm a pretty much average developer. I can just write PL SQL code super duper fast. But okay, I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of paintings by my father. I've got a little dog on my lap. So we are so ready to go. Let's go. All right, so let's share my screen, avoid infinity mirrors. So what I want to talk to you about is a cool new utility I'm working on. I'm not sure you'll ever be able to use it. It may just be something we use for our customers with our clients internally for Insum. But I've been building something called Insum. And the basic idea about Insum is to provide a much more comprehensive set of mail-related resources for Apex development. Apex comes with Apex_mail, which makes it really easy to send emails. It comes with templates, but there are a bunch of problems with it, and I wanted to basically fix it. So for example, if I click on this Meals and Mails application that we've defined inside Insum, I can do things like say that I'm in development or test or production. If I'm in development or test, when you send an email, it says the email came from development, which is always reassuring when you're starting to spam. If you want to make sure you never spam anybody, I can just say, you know what, I don't want to send the email to whomever it's being sent to. You can redirect it to me, and I can just put in my email address. Lots and lots of other features. The point here is not to show you an Insum, but to say, this is what I've been working on. Now, the way I generally work on things is I build a big PL SQL API. And then, because we have the wonder of Apex, and of course it's an Apex context, we build an application over it, over my API. And then I can do things, just to point this out, I just think it's so cool. This app is supposed to be a standalone resource, so I can include all the documentation for the app and how to use it inside the app itself. So fun stuff. But as I said, it basically required this PL SQL API that I would build first. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was to make it as easy as possible for a developer who's going to write some email or send some emails to build an API, to build their code to send the emails. And so let's take a look at that code, because what I love to do, as some of you may know, is generate code. I'm going to drill down into a template. These are not the Apex templates, they're the Insum templates, which offer many features above the kind of plain vanilla Apex templates. I'm going to generate the code for this particular template. Now, let's go down to the bottom. This is my send procedure. So pretty much anytime I've got I'll just copy it into clipboard. Cool. Let's go over to SQL Developer. Let's open my temp file. That's an easy repository for what I want to show you. Right. So basically, for every template I create, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, I end up writing a send email for that template procedure. And I thought, well, why not generate it? So in my generator, I look for all the placeholders I can find inside the template, and I automatically generate calls to substitute the placeholders. Here's the send with template. You have to put in the different values here. But most of the code's written for you, which I love to do. All right, now let's take a look at the API here. The first thing I do after begin is initialize the template, and I say, this is the application I'm working in. This is the template I'm working in. And after that, notice that when I call substitute placeholder, I don't say which template I'm talking about. When I say send with template, I don't indicate the template I'm sending. That's already been set by my call to initialize template. So I feel like by taking this approach, you tell me which template you're going to work with, and the rest of that block of code, you don't have to keep reminding me. It's a simpler, easier way to provide an API to the users of this package, of this utility. So I hope you'll agree. I've done something similar with something we call Insum Debug, which is an alternative to Logger. Logger has this pattern of always having to pass in the parameters, like the array of the parameters has to be passed in over and over again. I don't like that. So what I did was take this approach instead. Now, probably you're thinking to yourself, how did he do that? Well, it's no big surprise or rocket science, because that's not possible in PL SQL, and I'm not a rocket scientist. What I do is create global level data structures, global level variables. So when I call initialize template, I set the current application and the current template. And all the information about the application is loaded up into this gcurrent structure, which is a record that has within it another record that has within it who knows what. And then I've got my current template. And that has all the elements of all the columns of the template table, plus a bunch of other stuff, plus the list of substitution placeholders that we use to generate this code right here. So I've got these variables at the package level that I'm initializing and then using. Now, let's go over to Feuertips. So I've been doing these Feuertips for a while. And if you go all the way back to the very beginning, we're at 34, I think now. If we go all the way back to the very beginning, number 2 was bad lazy, good lazy. I think it's really important to be a lazy developer. You're more productive, but you have to be lazy in the right way. And let's see, I think it was number 4 was don't initialize your package. And don't initialize your package was primarily about the reliance on or the danger of relying on global level variables. So the package has state, but the problem with that approach is that since I'm working with a connection pool, I might connect to a different session between different server calls. I could end up with a different PGA, a different set of values in my gcurrent and gtemplate. Now, it's not likely to happen in Apex because Apex does a lot of work to help you keep connected to the same connection in the pool, but it could happen. Okay, so I violated, or I potentially violated one of my tips, which is using a lot of package level variables. Even though I don't actually initialize those variables, I essentially set package state when I call that program. But I would counter argue that in this case, we're good. It's not a problem because, in this piece of code, I initialize my package state and then I do all my stuff in that single block of code and then return control. So within this procedure, no question, what I set gcurrent and gtemplate to will be valid for the entire set of that block. So even though I'm relying on session level or package level variables in this case, I believe it is quite justified and appropriate. So this is good lazy. I'm making it easy for the developer to be lazy by not passing in that parameter over and over and over again. Then things went kind of sour, bad. So I said to myself, okay, so what I'm going to do is always make sure that the current application is set. So basically, if you look at the API, and so this is a pretty big package now, lots of programs. I'm not going to go through all of it. But one thing you'll note, you'll be able to tell is that, let's find some examples. Oh, that's the new one. I want to show you the old one. Right, you won't see the examples there. So in my old one, here we go. Okay, so I say, here's my procedure, set how to send. Basically, do I want to send to the person it's intended to, or I'm only testing, only log, etc. And the last parameter, and this is a common pattern, the last parameter in my procedures and functions will be the application name with the default of null. Now, usually this would be the first parameter. What application do I want to set how to send? But because I've got this concept of a current application, I figure you don't have to send the application name in every time. And if it's null, we'll do the right thing behind the scenes and find the right application, in theory. So this is the approach I took. Application name, even if it's first or if it's only, default null. You don't have to pass it. You don't have to pass it. You don't have to pass it. Here it is, way at the bottom, the thing that you'd think would be at the top. And if you look inside the package body, what you'll find is that over and over again, the first thing I do is set current application. Let's see. Let's search for that string. 30 different times. It just goes on and on and on. And I thought this was a good thing. So anywhere, any element of the API you call, you don't have to pass in the application name. We always set current application. Sounds good, right? So we started doing testing, and a lot of Instamail was working right. But then a couple times, and it was usually on a Friday when my DBA support's on their way out for the day, I seemed to go into infinite loops. And at first I thought it was an infinite loop because I'm really good at writing while loops against sparse collections without checking to see when the index is null. So then it just goes into a tight loop. And, that's the end of that. But it turns out that the infinite loop I was in here was an infinite recursion loop. set current application was being called. It was doing some other stuff in between, calling some other elements in the application, which called set current application again. Then there was a failure down the line, but somehow I was tracking the failure and it was continuing to try to set the current application 1,000, 1,000,000, 100 million times, kills it. So I thought to myself, oh no, this is a really bad idea. So here's the thing. Obviously, it's a really bad idea when you've got A calling B calling C calling A calling B calling D calling A calling Q calling A. Really, really bad stuff. But the core thing that I realized is that I had gotten really lazy. So by making this decision that don't worry, you don't have to provide the application name, I'll call set current application all over the place. Well, I just started using it for internal API calls. Remember, I think that you can justify this approach of having package level state within the single server call, the single call to my procedure. But I've got all these different disconnected elements in my API that might be called in and out, and they all can rely on this global scope. Well, it's just a bad idea. The other thing that was really bad is it was just so lazy. Look at this. Set the current application, which does a whole bunch of different stuff. I'm not going to get into the details, but it queries from Apex views. It queries from the table for that application, puts it all together. I only needed to get the how to send value from my current application row and see if it equals this constant. But I thought to myself, why write the query over and over again when I can just call set current application? Yeah. So it was a couple of weekends ago. I had already run into one of these A equals B equals C equals A scenarios, and I thought I fixed it. And then lo and behold, it's Saturday, and my session goes spinning off into Never Never Land, never comes back, and it eventually died. But I realized, wow, it happened again. This is really bad news. I need to rethink this. So I got unlazy that weekend. And let's take a look at the differences. So in fact, let's just start with this right where I was, set how to send.
Stephen, when you have a chance, we have a couple of questions.
Oh, sure. Let's take a break and ask questions. So why don't you put me back up on the screen? Okay. Sorry. My fault. So you can't prepare two emails at the same time. You work with one template at a time, Nils. So I say, this is the template I want to send an email for. So you make that template current, you set up the placeholders, you send the email. Then you can initialize to a different template and then send an email based on that template. So you're not preparing emails, you're preparing the template to be used in the sending mode. So I think I know what you're saying. Can you share my screen again? Move you out of the way. I love how Zoom moves the window out of the way automatically. So if we go back to that piece of code I was showing you, right here, I initialize the template. I could certainly call send to template multiple times in the same block, and I certainly have a number of examples of doing that. I might send to this person, send to the owner of the project, then send to the tech lead of the project. Then I would simply change what the P2s are. Or I could even, after I do the first send with template, I could go back and change some of these values. I could do other calls to substitute placeholders. So yes, you can definitely support multiple emails in the same block of code with the same template. Next. How do you handle different instance settings, mail settings, and dev test, etc.? Okay. So this is an Insum mail question. I'll answer it hopefully pretty quickly, but I don't want to spend too much time to my own horn, because again, I'm not even sure that you'll be able to ever use this yourselves directly, though I hope we do productize it. So let's get my screen out of the way. If you can share my screen again. This was handle different instance settings, right? So the basic idea is that I'm in development. So in my development environment, I set my parameters here, but essentially the main thing that I'm doing here is defining templates with all the information in them. So this is really the main work that you do within any mail environment, which is you define your templates. And then what you can do is, and so when you're in development, of course, when you're sending emails, you'll probably want to say testers only. You might even say limit of 10 emails a day and so on. When I I can then export my application into a JSON document. When I import my JSON document, let's go out here. I'll be asked to say which schema am I working or which phase am I in. If I'm importing into test, I set it that way. If I'm importing into production, I probably set it this way. And then your application will come up inside your Instamail instance in production, and you can make all the changes to settings you want. So it's really just settings per Apex environment that you're in. Any more questions? What is Falcor saying? That's Moonbeam in the back, and she's probably saying there was a noise somewhere, a beep or a horn, and she's very sensitive. I'm glad I don't live near a lot of other people. Okay, any other things? Prepares a local procedure. Yep. Okay, so that's it. Okay, let's go back to the code then. All right, so I had this situation where I was calling set current application over and over again. Now let's see what it looks like in production, in my current version of code. So set had a send. Is that the same one? Wow. I moved the application name up to the top. Here's what it was before. Set current application, update mail, and then reset. Then I have to set the default and current out, a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so all of that changed to voila. Just do the update. I don't need to get all that information. Let's say, let's get the application state. No, that's probably not a good example. Let's look for some more set currents. Show you some other examples. Yeah, in production is a great one. So I call the set current application. I go through all the settings simply to say, hey, what's the application state? Is it development, test, or production? Okay. So it looks really nice, doesn't it? It's very elegant and simple. I set the current app, and then I return the value. So the pattern is nice and concise, but I'm hiding this complexity that leads to the problem. But, you know, it's just kind of ridiculous looking back on it. So now, in production, in development, in test, they're all single line functions, not even two lines, because I have a single separate function that simply says, hey, get the application state, return it. That's all you need. Excuse me for a second. You guys go out. Go ahead. Thanks, Jonathan. Bye. Okay, that was fun. Okay, so the point is I got super lazy by being seduced by this API that I built. I'll actually show you my whole generate mail package that I do. So having this very simple API that allows me to avoid re-entering parameters, I then made the mistake of extending the justification for that. That was an end user feature of Instamail to users of the underlying API. And I thought, wow, this is so easy, but it was not. It was, in fact, super duper bad. Let me see if I can go back to my super duper bad lazy. Bad lazy. Okay. So that's a reinforcement of a couple of lessons for me and hopefully for you too, which is that it is justifiable and can be very useful to have package level variables, package level state, but be careful about how you do it, and don't let it lead you down a trail where you end up in a place that you really didn't want to be to begin with. And of course, ending up with some issues like my permanent looping, my permanent recursive calls. Now, so that's the end of that part. Any other comments or questions I should look at? No. Okay. So I want to talk about one other thing now. If you could stop sharing my screen. Oh, you weren't sharing my screen. Or were you? That was confusing. Okay. So you might not have seen a bunch of stuff I was just talking about. So let's see. Here's a comment from Anton. Sorry, Mark. Just a reminder, those infinite loops are less problematic if you use the DB resource manager to automatically kill them off. Thank you. Now, is that something I have the ability to do, Anton, or you have to get a DBA to do it? I don't know about the DB resource manager, but we have DBA resources at Insum. So I say, help, and they even help you on the weekend, which is really, really nice. Okay, so go ahead and hide that, Mark. Thank you. So the one thing I want to talk now, and then we'll finish up with all the usual good stuff I do. In addition, Anton says the DBA has to do the DB resource manager killing for you. Nice. When I was at Oracle, by the way, Connor McDonald, some of you may have heard of Connor McDonald, wrote up a really nice procedure that IT support then made available to us in a secure way that would allow me to kill my own sessions and only my own sessions. Obviously, DBAs can kill sessions, but you got to make sure you don't kill somebody else's. So Connor came up with a way to only allow you to get at yours. If you don't have something like that already, try building it. Ask Connor. I don't know. Anyway, so the last thing I want to talk about is the power of encapsulation. It's something I've really urged on all of us a lot over the years, and probably too much, and sometimes you can overdo it, like I just overdid package state. But again, I want to just go back to, if you could share my screen, I want to go back to Insum Mail. So Apex Mail is a really great package. Apexmail.send. So Apex Mail has a very small number of programs. In fact, one of the things about Insum Mail is that you can simply do a global search and replace of all your calls to apex_mail, change it to insum_mail, and they'll all work. So here we have the entire API for Insum Mail. I even use conditional compilation against Apex versions. I think I talked about that on Feuertips recently. If not, I'll make sure to do that next time. Anyway, so the whole API is there. It's a very wonderful utility from the Apex developers, as are many of the built-in packages from Apex and Oracle Database. The problem is that if you call Apex Mail send directly, so if in your application code, when you need to send an email, you do direct calls to Apex Mail, then there's nothing between you and the underlying utility. In other words, all you get and all you can use is what Apex Mail gives to you. Sometimes you don't need anything else. But in the case of Apex Mail, I got to say that there are some areas of improvement that are needed, primarily around templates. And I don't want to bang on that a whole lot. There are just a few things like you can't have shared headers and footers. If you need to change the text of your template, you have to redeploy your application. They're just not there yet. They'll probably get there eventually. Then there are other things like, avoiding spamming people and redirecting emails. But those are all things that are not available in Apex Mail. However, if you can simply build a package like Insum Mail, and it's not rocket science. So if you call Apex Mail send, so here's the API for Apex Mail send. So publicly, you've changed apex_mail to insum_mail. Behind the scenes, we say, wait a minute, we're not just going to call apexmail.send. We're going to do some stuff first. So what I do is call send internal. And send internal does a lot of good stuff. Well, whoever you were going to send it to, we're not necessarily going to send it to that person because we might have to override for testing. Let's see, we're going to make sure, have you disabled the application for email? Maybe you can't shut down the application, but you never want an email to go out from this application again. Single click on the UI, and it automatically disables application, so we stop all emails right there. Check for opt-outs. We have integrated opt-outs. So if somebody says, I want to unsubscribe, you don't have to manage that in your own application. It's a part of the email subsystem. We check for opt-outs, and then obviously don't continue if so. So we say, and then we also have our internal email log. So we save all the emails that go out. We check to see whether or not you've reached your daily limit. Finally, we call Apex Mail send. Okay, the email is sent. We might even do an attachment. Then we can check for errors. Was there an error in the queue from that? You might have said send email, but it said, whoa, we got a problem with authentication or this or that or the other, or the to address was null. It didn't go out. So we actually keep track of that information. We grab it in our own error log, in our own mail log. And you can then resend emails that weren't successfully sent the first time, or we can mark it as sent and then push if you want us to push out to the queue. So the fundamental point I want to make here is that if you call apex_mail.send yourself directly in your code, you're pretty much stuck with what they do for you. But as soon as you put a single procedure around Apex Mail send, just call it your own mypackage.send, then in between and after the call to Apex Mail send, you can add all these other features. And then you just have to make sure that nobody in the application world, in your application team, does make direct calls to apex_mail, which you can pretty easily do by searching out code. I suppose you could somehow try to disable access to the package, but I wouldn't do that. And just make sure that you're always calling your mail package, or maybe hopefully someday the Insum mail package. And then you get all this extra benefit, because you can intercede, you can interrupt a call to either not do it differently, store information, retrieve information. I cannot, please stop sharing my screen. I cannot overemphasize the value of encapsulation when you're writing utilities like this one, or using underlying built-in utilities like Apex Mail or DBMS output. All sorts of examples over the years that many of us have built layers around to enhance the abilities of. Again, you can certainly overdo it sometimes. I'm good at overdoing it, so I can think of a number of times I've overdone it. But I think for mail, Insum Mail is proving to be just an absolutely powerful, very helpful utility. Okay, let's see some little final comments from Anton. I'm just going to put, yeah, there you go. So the DB Resource Manager, you just have to set it up once and it will automatically detect the runaway process in the future. Well, I'm going to talk to my folks in Insum about that. That's nice. And kill it, of course. Thank you, Anton. Okay, so what I'd like to do is obviously keep the questions or comments coming around anything to do with mail. If you want to learn more about Instamail, happy to tell you more. What I'd like to do now is switch off to the non-super technical side of things and talk about a favorite book that I'd recommend to all of you and a few different groups. We'd like to have one pick for a donation this week. And I've got to say, let's give it to Anton. So Anton, I'm going to show you 3 organizations. If you could hide my screen or show my screen. Anton, you get to pick the organization this week. And Mark, who's helping me this week also, suggested we focus on plastic and stopping plastic pollution. So we've got a few different organizations. One is the Plastic Pollution Coalition, which has a mission of growing. It's a global alliance. What happened to you? A global alliance of more than 1,200 organizations working to reduce plastic pollution. Gotta love it. The Plastic Oceans Organizations, which works to clean up the plastic in oceans. And I'm sure you've all heard about the garbage island that's bigger than New Zealand now. I can't keep track. It's also gross and disgusting and horrible. And Save Our Shores, which has 3 focuses. One is clean shores, healthy habitats for the animals, all of us living along the shores, and improving the quality of the water around us. So Anton, if you could pick one of those, Plastic Pollution Coalition, Ending Plastic Pollution, and Save Our Shores, that would be great. And beyond that, so for all of you folks, in terms of plastic, just do everything you possibly can. When I take a walk in the woods and I go hiking with my dogs every day, all the time, all over the place, I always carry a plastic bag with me. And I fill it up with trash as I go and then toss it away. It's only a little bit at a time, obviously, but if we all do that, so many of our natural areas will be so much better off. And of course, animals will die less because of it. All right, stop sharing my screen for a moment. I think I've got some comments up here to address. Let's pull it back over. Nils Hecker, regarding encapsulation, I personally would have used an object type for encapsulating the template variables and replacements. Why, Niels? Why? So what he's suggesting is, please share my screen, that instead of using these record structures, so I've got 2 record structures. One is one for my application that has the entire row from the mail application plus some additional information, and my template record, which has a bunch of columns in it, or fields for columns from the table, plus an array. And he's suggesting it should be type is object. And in fact, I believe in the latest iteration of Oracle Database 21C, you can now have non-persistent database object types. I can actually declare an object type inside PL SQL code, name it as non-persistent, which means it can never be used as a column type in a table and so on. So I think you could make a pretty much one-to-one switch from a record to an object type. But I would argue, and why don't you go ahead and stop sharing my screen, but I would argue that there's not really much of any advantage to doing that. What's the added advantage, Nils? So let me know, and we'll keep moving through here. Can you show the comment from Rachel Rice? Do you use Insum with Apex flows? Well, to be quite honest, Insum we're just finishing the touches on it. I've been developing it with Bernadette Lazar, another consultant at Insum. We started in December, so it hasn't been that long. And we're still going through kind of burning out the bugs, burning in all the features, and we're going to start using on some new projects starting next month. So I'm not sure about integration with Apex flows yet. I don't even know much about Apex flows, though I've seen lots of good stuff about it. But if it uses email, we should definitely look at that integration. Thanks. Anton, my daughter spoke at our town meeting in support of a local plastic bag ban. That's great. And Save Our Shores. So we'll give $25 to Save Our Shores. And I think it's great that she spoke out. Hopefully the town will ban plastic bags. What's been amazing about all the push around plastic bags and reducing their production and consumption is that people always find a way to work around them, oddly enough. I remember in Chicago, they banned the really thin plastic bags, and you can only use plastic bags that could be used at a minimum 125 or so times. And they're really, I'm still using them. This is 3 years after leaving Chicago. But people just started using those like disposable bags and throwing them away. Humans. My favorite bumper sticker that my wife ever gave me was, "My species disappoints me." And that's what counts, right? My feelings about my species. Okay, so I think that's it for all of those comments. Let's now share my screen for one last point, which is my favorite book of the week, my recommended cultural artifact. And it is called What a Plant Knows. So humans have all sorts of interesting opinions about other species. And I think at this point, most humans who pay attention and accept evolution as a fact, really, a theory that is undeniable, don't have a lot of problems with associating emotions and many, many different aspects of how we live in the world with other mammals. Bears are altruistic. Many mammals have families they treat them the same way we treat our families and so on. But then when you get outside of mammals, it kind of falls away a bit. So people don't recognize, for example, that fishes are sentient. But then there are plants like, oh, yes, you think a plant feels pain. Oh, you think a plant thinks? Well, oh my gosh, you should read this book. The things we now know about plants and how they work are simply incredible. They feel, they know, they see, they move. They do all sorts of incredible things, communicate with each other, preference their own their own children over non-children plants. In the case of trees. So there's so much you can learn about plants. And to me, this idea that we would think, for example, that it's ridiculous to think that a plant would feel pain or that a plant might think, it's really just another example of us trying to fit the whole world into our way of thinking and doing. Obviously, plants would think and feel very differently from humans, probably in a way we can't even conceive. So therefore, they can't possibly do it. So check it out. If you're ever thinking to yourself, who cares about plants? They don't feel anything. Well, read the book and think again. And we have a comment from Nils. Okay, you can select data that must, so now we're going back to the comment about using an object type instead of a record type. Okay, so you can select data that must replace a placeholder inside a template and can replace it in two templates at the same time without any code between and you can replace it in two templates at the same time without any other code between the two replaces. I got to think about that one. Thank you, Nils. I'll definitely grab that comment and give it some more thought, and maybe I'll follow up with you. And maybe maybe I'll get back to it next week. And then from Judith, I just wonder, why did all those environment-saving movements start in the 24th hour before the planet is going to die, and not when all those damaging products started to appear on the market? Judith, that is such a great question, because it's similar to the question or the criticism that people raise about climate scientists these days is, you didn't tell us it was going to be this bad this soon. Well, climate scientists have been saying since the 60s, oh no, we have an impending catastrophe. We have to stop doing what we're doing. Everything must change. And people have been worrying about plastic and organizing around plastic, Judith, for decades. The only problem is that most of us didn't pay any attention. Now we're being forced to pay attention, partly because we just have a global tsunami of information all the time coming at us. So we all can see the rivers choked with plastic, even when we don't live near them. But anyway, those environment-saving movements didn't start in the 24th hour. Most humans are starting in the 24th hour, 59th minute, 59th second. But please, everybody, don't blame those of us, and I've barely been going compared to a lot of other people, don't blame those of us who are raising and have been raising the alarm for not doing enough. On that happy note, let's see, isn't this the same what happens today with smartphones? Isn't this? Well, I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, I think that we're creating all sorts of problems for our next generations. Wow, am I going off on soapboxes? Anyway, I'll stop my soapbox. Thanks for your great comments. Hopefully you learned some additional or relearn lessons along with me about being very careful about when to be lazy, when not to be lazy, and remember who to be lazy for. So my main takeaway was I was trying to be lazy and easy on myself when I shouldn't have been. And remember to encapsulate, especially when you start to work with any new major utility. It could be not only from Oracle, just from another developer in your team, and give yourself some flexibility around that through encapsulation. All right, everybody, take care, stay safe, stay healthy. I recommend staying masked. I'm planning on staying masked when I go outdoors, outside, in indoor other places for a long time to come. I don't care what the rules say, what the mandates are. Don't take unnecessary risks. Take care, everybody. Happy coding.